Welcome into another edition of the Hang Time Podcast. Sekou Smith here in New York City. My main man, John Schumann, in New Jersey, right across the water from me here. Our John Hartzell, our producer, behind the glass in Atlanta. Shu, I don't even know why we waste time on anything else. What is going on? Is this the Twilight Zone? I thought you were kidding around when you said you had the Clippers at number one in this week's NBA.com power rankings, and now I find out it's true. What am I missing here?
This was one of the first weeks in a long time, probably the first week in a long time, where I was had gotten through writing about every team and then started to say, all right, I got to put them in some sort of order, and basically had no idea who was going to be number one because there was no, I'll go over last week's top five.
Okay.
Number one last week was Toronto. They lost 3 straight. New Orleans, Detroit, at Boston, and then they beat the Bulls. Number 2 last week was Portland. They lost to the Lakers and to the Wolves, and then beat the Wizards. Number 3 last week was Milwaukee. They lost at home to Memphis, and beat the Bulls. Number 4 last week was Golden State. They went 0-3 in Texas. Number 5 last week was Denver. They've lost 5 of their last 6. And then number 6 last week was the Los Angeles Clippers, and one of my favorite teams to watch, and they have won 4 straight games. So they beat the Bucks and the Warriors at home and the Spurs at home. So they beat 2 of the 5 teams that I mentioned already. And then they started a road trip, and by coming back from, I want to say 15, 16, something like that, down in Brooklyn, and coming back to win. So what the heck? I didn't know what to do. So Clippers are your number one team for this week. And the great thing, I say it every week, the great thing about power rankings is that you get to try again the next week and put them in order again. And
right.
One of these weeks I'll get it all right, but whatever.
I have a feeling, Shu, that this is more about a certain player on the Clippers roster who you adore and have a shrine in your house to. In this,
there's a few players on the Clippers roster that I adore right now, actually. Milos is barely playing. My man Milos is barely playing.
Right.
But I have become a big Montrezl Harrell fan over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. He's my favorite guy
favorite dude with red hair in the NBA?
Who barely gets the ball over the rim when he dunks, but then dunks with incredible force and veracity. So I like watching Montrezl Harrell. Is he the best backup center in the league right now? I'm not sure, but
maybe.
Be close. Maybe. And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, this dude is really good. The rookie came in and came in ready to play. He's been starting with who's out? Avery Bradley has been out. And Gilgeous-Alexander has gone and jumped into the starting lineup. I don't know if he'll ever leave the starting lineup now because he's really good. And although they close with him, they go to, Lou Williams is obviously the sixth man and obviously their closer.
Right.
And they've been, they've won a lot of close games. They've won their last 5 games that were within 5 points in the last 5 minutes. And their closers are Williams and Gilgeous-Alexander. And they both hit some big shots last week in a couple of those close wins. It's a fun team. I mean, I like watching them. And like I said, the rankings, I've said this all, the rankings don't matter. So whatever, why not have a little bit of fun with it? Jump the Clippers up there. If you go by point differential, the Bucks are still number one. If you go by quality wins, probably the Blazers are number one. The Raptors have the best record in the league. The Warriors are the title favorites, right? But you can't go wrong with picking any of those teams to be number one. So
sure. Aside from making Clipper Daryl's Thanksgiving with this list on the power rankings, is this Doc Rivers' finest stretch as a coach, you think? With the Clippers in terms of what they've lost over the last season and a half, couple seasons. And what he's done to keep them competitive and in the mix, in the Western Conference playoff hunt like they are right now. I mean, this is unheard of for a team to lose players the caliber of Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan even. But then a lot of their other role players, veterans, Jamal Crawford, you go down the list.
Redick.
They had all this assortment of players that was supposed to make them a contender. They're all gone,
yep.
and they're rolling like this.
I think it's impressive in looking back and what they've lost, but also impressive in looking forward in that this is kind of a transition year for them, and that a bunch of these guys that they have on the roster now are on expiring deals. Like a bunch of these veterans are on the last year of their contract. And with that in mind, they could all be going for theirs and, not have that much cohesion because they're worried about their own agendas. So I think it's impressive in that sense too, in that he's gotten a bunch of guys that may not be together for long to play together and to play well. I mean, again, we know the Clippers have their eye on next summer and trying to get a big free agent or two. And so the players that are there now could say, oh, they don't care about me. They care about trying to get Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard next summer. But they're all in on playing well right now. And I think that's impressive. And I think Doc deserves a lot of credit for that.
So if I'm a conspiracy theorist and I'm trying to come up with reasons as to why the Clippers are doing as well as they are, I could say this is the Jerry West bump. Maybe this is Jerry West, taking a keen eye to that roster and making some suggestions about what they do. Or
Lee Jenkins bump, perhaps?
Lee Jenkins bump. Yeah, it could be. It could be the fact that they're taking an outside-the-box look at their team and franchise, and maybe that's what's led to them being such a competitive group when we expect maybe less of them. I mean, what gives? I mean, this doesn't happen in the NBA. I mean, Memphis is doing it a little bit right now, but they've got Marc Gasol and Mike Conley. So they've got some holdover all-star caliber talent that's leading them right now. I don't have any explanation for how the Clippers are doing this.
And the thing is, they've played a tough schedule. They've done it through a tough schedule. There's 17 teams that are over 500, and the Clippers have played the most games within that group. They're getting by beating. Like, they beat Brooklyn the other day, but that's only one of their 3 games that they've played against teams that have losing records, so it's not like they're just getting by against bad teams. And they've had close games. Like I said, they've had close games. So the point differential doesn't scream at you, but a win is a win. And we've talked about how many like you need to have a certain amount of wins through your first 20 games to really start think that you have a shot at the playoffs, and the Clippers are there. They're getting there.
This isn't just a Clippers twilight zone. This is in a top 5 of the power rankings twilight zone. The Bucks are 2, the Trailblazers are 3, the Raptors are 4, and they've been good all year, of course, and they're coming off a huge season. In Oklahoma City, who was dead in the water the first 4 games of the year, they're 10-5 and 5th.
Now that's a team that has taken advantage of a light schedule, but they've won 10 of their last 11. They have the best record in November, the best point differential per 100 possessions in November, and they've done that with Russell Westbrook having missed, I think, the last 7 games. So their schedule's about to get tough, a little bit tougher, but they're also about to get Westbrook back. So, we'll see how they go. But like I said, they're taking advantage of a soft schedule, but you can only play the teams in front of you, and they've taken care of business, which is important.
The other freaky part about this, Shu, is that we spent all this time talking about the other team that plays in Staples Center. And with good reason. LeBron James is having a typical LeBron James-like season statistically. 16 years in, Shu, going off for 51 points in his old stomping grounds in Miami, showing you that Father Time is undefeated except for the fight that he has not taken up yet with one LeBron Raymond James. I don't even know how we're supposed to explain LeBron to people 20 years from now who won't have been alive when he was in his prime. I tweeted some about this earlier. I spent a lot of time telling my kids, my sons who are basketball fanatics, about Michael Jordan because they weren't alive during his prime. So they've been able to watch videos, see footage of him doing all his stuff, but it's not the same as watching it live in real time. And I'm wondering, what will that conversation be like in 20 years when we're trying to explain LeBron being able to play at this level, this deep into his career? It's going to sound like urban legend. It's going to sound like foolishness. Trying to tell somebody that LeBron was going out, getting 50, 16 years into his career and shooting 6 of 8 from 3 and doing all this stuff. He's 34 years old. I mean, it boggles the mind to me that LeBron could still perform like this when all of his contemporaries, all the guys who came into the league with him are getting knocked out. They're taking TKOs from Father Time. How is LeBron just a mutant? I mean, is he just that ultimate outlier in every way when you look at his performance at this stage of his career?
I can't explain it. I mean, the guy doesn't get hurt. We've talked about his minutes over the course of his career compared to anybody else in the league over that time. He's basically played an extra 3 seasons if you just look at minutes played since he came to the league 15 years ago. I think with this Lakers team, he's starting to take a little bit more control offensively.
And that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. The last 2 games have been his highest usage rates of the season so far. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the 51, he had, I forget what it was, 40-something 2 games earlier. And their defense has been better. Tyson Chandler has helped them defensively. Their defense has been at its best with Chandler on the floor, and it's been actually at its best with Chandler and LeBron on the floor together. So And I think that's about size and obviously experience. And they're there, they're in that big pack of Western Conference teams that it's hard to make much sense of at this point. There's just a lot of teams that have had ups and downs already through 15 games or so. The Spurs are another one that are up and down, inconsistent on either end, on both ends of the floor. And so, we still need I feel like we still need another couple weeks before we really start to figure out this Western Conference, and maybe we need longer than that too.
You mentioned the Warriors, being the championship favorites. Right now, they look like anything but, Shu. They're playing without Stephen Curry and Draymond Green, facing some adversity that we haven't seen from them in quite some time. I think it would be silly of us to panic, but is it kind of nice to have them come back to earth a little bit? Does that provide a little more intrigue, you think? Just in terms of maybe we can imagine, you can start thinking about a conference finals where they don't go in as the runaway favorite, or maybe there's, thicker competition for them in the finals this year from the Eastern Conference representative than we might have imagined. I don't want to make too much of it, but I've been listening to Steve Kerr talk about his team and what state they're in right now and kind of how their spirit's been broken a little bit. It's interesting. You can't even blame this all on Draymond Green, his dust up with KD. And, this is bigger than one instance. This seems like there's kind of a chink in the armor, if you would, in terms of the makeup of this Warriors team. They're not getting that strength in numbers production that they relied on so heavily, in years past.
Yeah, I think, obviously if they're at their best, they're head and shoulders above everybody else. And if there's any time to be playing your worst basketball of the last 5 years, it's in mid-November, right?
Right.
But they've just created more questions that they now have to go answer between now and April. They've taken a step backward. They have more work to do than probably we thought they would have to do.
Sure.
And that includes, integrating DeMarcus Cousins when he gets healthy.
I forgot. Yeah, they are playing without Cousins as well.
Basically, they've been playing a lot of games without Curry and Green. So, and Curry, we've said it before, is their most important player as far as their offensive flow and getting them into their offense and creating the havoc among the opponents in the opponent's defense that gets guys open. And without him, and then without Green playmaking, you're going to see Durant and Thompson have to do a little bit more with the ball than they would if everybody was healthy. But I think there's questions about their depth. Quinn Cook has been really good, but other than that, their bench hasn't been great. And so, like I said, I think they just have, if they get it all together, we're not going to pick against them. But they just have. It's like they've taken a step backward and have now more ground to make up, over the next 65 games than we would have expected. We would expect them to be in a different spot right now, obviously.
The one part of the conversation where the Warriors are concerned as a group, Shu, and you've made this point to me in the past, and I've kind of pushed back on it, is about Steph. I'm convinced now more than ever. I don't care if he's the MVP or not of the league. He's clearly the MVP, the MIP of that Warriors team. They truly are a different monster when Steph is at his best, even more so during the regular season than when you don't have Kevin Durant. I used to fight against that. I used to always be one of these proponents of, well, whoever the best player is, that's the center of your team. That's the guy that serves as the bellwether for your team. I still think Durant is the most dynamic player because of his size and scoring ability, obviously. But I think it's, without question, Steph's importance to this team has been highlighted during this stretch more than ever, than I can remember it happening previously. Just in terms of that spirit that Steve Kerr is talking about being broken, that doesn't occur when Steph's healthy and in the lineup. There's something about his presence that floats this thing for the Warriors. And, the offensive numbers are obvious. You're missing a 30-point scorer when he's not in the lineup. But it's more than that. It's the flow and the fact that Klay can be at his best when Steph is cooking, and that Durant can still play his best basketball with Steph in the mix. Without he and Draymond in the mix, they just seem like they're missing that backbone of what they do as a group, on both ends of the floor. They don't look like they're in sync to me at all without Steph right now, and with Draymond struggling with what he's been struggling with.
Yeah, there's always been a huge drop off in their offensive numbers with Curry off the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And that continued in the first 2 seasons with Durant. It was always like, they were basically 10 to 12 points per 100 possessions better offensively with Curry on the floor than they are with him off the floor. In fact, like through just maybe a week ago, that number wasn't such a big drop off with Curry off the floor. But I think these last few games now, you're going to see that, that drop off number has increased quite a bit. We've said it before, like his ability to shoot off the dribble just is the key to their offense and would be the key to any offense in the league, basically, because it just messes with defensive schemes. And then his ability to then give up the ball when he doesn't have a shot, to give up the ball and just keep moving, where that, the gravity that he has, where defenses have to keep track of him. And if they don't, this team is such a good passing team that they find him and he's open and he shoots off the catch. And that's even better than him shooting off the dribble. I think Durant can be a more important player in certain matchups. And with LeBron, I think that was the case. The ability, in addition to having Iguodala defending LeBron, to have Durant, a 7-footer to put in front of an agile 7-footer to put in front of LeBron for X amount of possessions per game, makes Durant have a additional value beyond what he has over the 82 games. But I think over the 82 games, Curry is their most important player just for what he provides for them offensively. And then I think we don't give him enough credit defensively. He doesn't hurt them defensively. I mean, they've been obviously a great defensive team for more than beyond the Steve Kerr era, even when Mark Jackson was the coach, and Curry was an element to that. He's not the best guard defender in the league, but he's certainly not the worst either.
One point of correction, Kevin Durant will swear to you that he's not a 7-footer. I want to clarify that next week.
Whatever.
I have another team that is kind of got me scratching my head shoe. That's the Boston Celtics. Big win over the Raptors. Showcase game Friday night under the lights, the whole 9 yards. 2 powerhouses supposed to be in the Eastern Conference. Kyrie looks great in that win over the Raptors. They show you what, the Celtics have a tendency this season to kind of play up to certain moments and then struggle in the aftermath. They struggled mightily in their next night out. The Jazz blew them up. I mean, lit them up when I was watching. It was ridiculous how poorly they look. I don't know if it's a letdown game so much. It was just, I didn't expect them to struggle as much as they did with the Jazz after looking as good as they did against the Raptors. Am I missing something with the Celtics in terms of they have yet to work through whatever it is Brad Stevens was going to have to figure out with his rotation, given all the talent they have and all the bodies they have back, and the need to make sure that each one of those guys has a very specific role in what they're doing? It's
a good question. I think the question of whether they need to break up their starting lineup is valid, and I might vote in favor of yes. Kyrie Irving had 43 and 11 assists in that Raptors win to sort of give the offense a ton of punch. But they've obviously came out of the gate slow offensively. They've got the number 1 defense in the league, but they ranked 27th offensively, and it's just been micro baby steps basically. Mm-hmm. With the offense, cited this in power rankings. They haven't scored more efficiently than the league average in 2 straight games all year. So basically, they had an efficient game against the Raptors, but then they had a rough offensive game against the Jazz. So basically, they haven't been able to put 2 good offensive games together all season. And we talked about this previously, like they rank 30th in the percentage of their shots that come from the paint. They rank 29th in free throw rate. And those numbers, the last I looked, are worse with their starting lineup together on the floor than they are overall. So it's like they settle for jump shots too much, especially that starting lineup. It's a ridiculously skilled starting lineup, but it's perimeter oriented. And so it's just a lot of jump shots, not enough attacking, not enough getting to the line. Gordon Hayward obviously doesn't have everything back, still getting his legs under him, doesn't have like the explosion. And Jaylen Brown has had a rough start.
He's not shooting it well at all.
No, he's got effective field goal percentage of 41%, which is down from 54%. Only a few players have had a bigger drop-off from last season to this season so far. So he's another one that's got an issue. Hayward has said he's willing to come off the bench. I would think about a Baines for Hayward swap. The Baines-Horford front line is more of a defensive front line, but Baines will get you some offensive rebounds. Baines will set some screens and allow you maybe to get into the paint a little bit more. So I would think about it, or if not, just, do the, sub real early in the first and third quarters so that you can get more mix and match lineups in there and see if that helps. But too many jumpers, basically, this team is settling for. They have the skill to win that way on occasion, but they need to be able to get to the paint. And the defense, has been terrific. But if they have a goal of getting to the finals, which I assume they do, they just have to get better offensively, and it hasn't really happened yet.
If I'm looking for a Thunder player to include in the Kia race to the MVP ladder on Friday,
it's got to be Paul George. I mean, he's been fantastic.
Is it fair that we swap PG for Russ, like put Paul George in there?
Absolutely. I mean, he's been terrific on both ends of the floor. I mean, he is one of the best two-way players in the league. I had a fun little stat. So they've been a great defensive team basically for the last few weeks, basically since that 0-4 start. But their offense is starting to pick up of late, even without Westbrook. And part of that is the strength of schedule, which we noted. But George has scored 30 points or more in 3 straight games for the first time since he came to OKC from Indiana. So I thought that was interesting. It's the first, his last 3 games he scored 30 or more, and it's the first time he's done that with the Thunder. And then Steven Adams has averaged a little over 20 points per game over his last 5, and that's the first time in his career that he has averaged 20 in a 5-game stretch. So those guys are, the anchors to their defense, but also starting to pick up their offensive production a little bit. And Schroeder has filled in pretty well, and the bench minutes have not been good. If you look at George's on-off numbers, it's because the bench is bad, and I guess that makes it an even stronger case for him to be on your MVP list, because when he's gone off the floor, they've struggled a bit, but they've been good enough to win. I think it's 10 of the last 11, which puts them right into it. Yeah. In that West mix as well.
Shout out to Dennis Schroeder, by the way. I did not know how that experiment would work.
I mean, we still don't know if he can play with Westbrook too.
But he's been really good for them for what they've needed to be at this point. And again, we're 15 games in. You never know how a season twists and turns, but so far, so good. I know this is a big deal to some people. The West just dominating the East in interconference games, 12-2 last week, 49-25 on the season. I don't care.
But I mean, I
don't care because I know it doesn't matter. Once you get to the finals, it's those 2 specific teams against each other, and it doesn't denote.
But it's just gonna. This is the. Basically, the West winning percentage now is their best of the last 20 years, and they have had a better record than the East in games between the 2 conferences in 18 of the last 19 seasons.
Right.
And this is, it's early, but right now we're looking at the most dominant the West has ever been, and that just affects the playoff races. I mean, you're gonna have West teams with winning records that don't make the playoffs. You're gonna have an East team if things continue the way they are. You're gonna have maybe 2 East teams with losing records that do make the playoffs. And that's just going to, once we get to February and March, you're going to hear those calls for a 1 through 16 playoff format.
We hear them no matter what, but yeah, you're right.
We're just going to hear them louder and more frequent if this sort of discrepancy continues.
Sure. Your team of the week, the Houston Rockets, had a nice 3-0 week after parting ways with Melo, which, boy, I hate for people to start connecting those dots again. Like, all you got to do is call the exterminator and get Melo out of the way and everything is fine. But I do agree that there's something about Melo these days that he's got the worst timing ever, or he's not seeing the writing on the wall, that the league is telling him something about his game, the way he plays, and the fact that it's just not, you don't build with that anymore. You don't build with players that play his style, so focused on one end and so unfocused on the other. But is it something about Melo in particular, maybe just the specific player and person that he is, that it's not – I'm serious, that it's just maybe not a fit for him in today's NBA?
He should be able to play spot minutes and offer you something, but the question is whether he's able to accept that. As far as the Rockets are – like we've talked about Melo – enough. And I hope he lands on it. I like the guy. I hope he lands somewhere and goes out the way he wants to go out.
Yes.
But as far as the Rockets are concerned, there's some coincidence in their winning streak, and there's some correlation. I think, Chris Paul has shot ridiculously well from 3-point range over the last 5 games. James Harden has been getting to the line more than almost as much as he ever has over the last 5 games. And Melo's departure also coincided with Eric Gordon returning from a 3-game absence. So,
right.
But and the funny thing is, if you look at where they've been ridiculously good is on the minutes where either Chris Paul or Harden is on the bench and the other one is on the floor. And those are the Eric Gordon minutes. And those are also the minutes that Carmelo is no longer there. Those end of the first quarter, start of the second quarter, end of the third quarter, start of the fourth. So there's, like I said, there's some, Melo isn't making Chris Paul shoot better, and Melo isn't getting James Harden to the line more, but their success in bench minutes where they have one of those guys on the floor and the opponent does not, and the opponent has most of its reserves on the floor, that's where the Rockets really took advantage last year, and I think they're starting to do it now. In these last several games, they've won 4 straight, and they have the best offense in the league over that 4-game winning streak. So they are they seem to be returning to form.
Right. There's a couple things I want to finish up with you here. Thanksgiving week, so we're going to give everybody a chance to fatten up on turkey and all the fixings on Thursday. We'll see you back here on the Monday after Thanksgiving. We're going to take a little hiatus for the holiday. Shoot, I don't know if I want to pull my hair out, what little I have left, or just ignore these reports about Dave Joerger being on the hot seat in Sacramento. I mean, they finally look like they're turning a corner and becoming a competitive team. And then we hear the rumblings about, Joerger wanting to win now and play the group he's playing, and the franchise leadership wanting to see more of Marvin Bagley III and what he can do. I mean, don't they understand that if you do it right and you're winning now, Marvin Bagley becomes an asset as you continue to do that, as opposed to scrapping whatever progress you're making in the name of, we got to showcase this rookie we selected so high in the draft, and we want to see what he can do. It's like, it'll come if you continue to win. He's going to have an opportunity to play his way into their rotation. I don't know what
he is in their rotation.
Right,
he plays regular minutes, 18 to 20 or something a night.
Right.
There's still the Kings lead the league in the percentage of their minutes that have been played by first or second year players. So they're still playing young guys. And, Zach Randolph been playing, he's been on the inactive list, I think, basically since the start of the season.
Right.
So they're still playing, and they just have so many young guys. And it's like, man, the Kings were 6-3. Can't they be happy with 6-3? Like, this is a team that's missed the playoffs. Is it 12 or 13 straight years?
Yeah.
Like, can't they be happy with 6-3? Even now,
No.
8-8. Can't they be happy with 8-8? Like,
No.
Come on. Seeing clear development in De'Aaron Fox, seeing
Buddy
clear
Hield's
development in Buddy Hield.
Yeah.
They just got my man Bogdanovich back a few games ago. Bagley's been good. Like, I like watching him, but he is skilled. Like,
he's super skilled.
He's got great hands, good footwork. He can score around the basket. He's going to be really good. So I don't like. Yeah, you don't need your 19-year-old or 18-year-old whatever to be playing 25 30 minutes right away. Like, man, give this guy some time. Like, I still think like their offense is too mid-range heavy, and that's been a problem under Joerger, but I can't argue with the results. Like, nobody expected this team to be 8-8 at this point, and they beat some good teams.
I don't get it. I don't understand.
I think this is a big week. Like, if this is real, like if they're really like thinking about, I think this is a big week for the Kings. They play the Jazz twice, and the Jazz are right there with them, tied 8-8.
Right.
They start the week with the Thunder. That's a big game, and that's a good test for the sort of the Thunder that have been getting by against a soft schedule. And then they also play at Golden State. So they play Oklahoma City at Utah, at Golden State, then versus Utah. So it's a big week for the Kings. If for them to sort of stay relevant, and like, because once they become irrelevant, once they go from 8-8 to 10-16 or something like that.
We're writing them off. We're going right back there.
Right. So, I would love for them to stay in that sort of Western Conference, within a game or two of 500 pack for as long as possible. And so I think this is a big week for them.
Yeah. Finally, and this should come from the no surprise category. Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN is reporting, as the Wizards season continues to spiral completely out of control, that they've now made it clear to teams, or at least given the impression to the rest of the league, that John Wall and Bradley Beal could be available via trade based on the discussions people are having. And this is, again, all being reported by Woj at ESPN. Was this the inevitable?
Sure. Yes. We've talked about it already. We've talked about what they could possibly do to shake things up. Beal is probably the guy every other team would love to have. Wall has got is it onerous, right? Contract going forward. And Otto Porter has just been a disappointment, especially this season. So, and Kelly Oubre too hasn't really, lived up to his potential. I was a little worried. Like I look at them and they've been bad. Like they took they won 3 straight games, but then they lost at home to the Nets and the Blazers over the weekend. Right. The thing is, they're in the East. Like they could be meandering along just like this until mid-January, and then they could always say, hey, we go, 8-2 over our next 10 and we're in 7th place, it's I was a little worried that they in the East, they just always have the carrot of, hey, we're only X amount of games out of 7th place or 6th place, because there's really only 5 teams in the East that are good right now. But if they're, I don't necessarily want them to shake it up, because I like those players, and it's just more of a disappointment that they haven't lived up to their potential. They haven't played together enough. They haven't made them. They haven't.
It hasn't worked like it should.
What's the expression, that the whole is much less than the sum of the parts, or something like that? That's. But yeah, it's good that they realize that something's not working and that they need to shake it up. The question is, how feasible is that, and given the contract status of all those guys?
Well, here's to everybody getting a chance to spend their Thanksgiving in the same place they started this season. Let's hope that there's some stability between now and Black Friday. You can do anything you want after things. I mean,
let's be thankful that the Warriors, the Wolves did finally
yes
put us out of our collective misery by trading Jimmy Butler last week.
Yes, and we'll go deep on the Sixers in the coming weeks. I want to give that a little more time to play out before we talk to somebody who's up close and personal to that situation and can break it down for us. Be sure to check out the full rankings at NBA.com/power rankings. John Schuhmann's handiwork every Monday, grading and evaluating the top teams in the league, 1 through 30. He goes through them all on his NBA power rankings every week. We'll be back next Monday with another episode of the Hang Time Podcast. We're off for Thanksgiving. Enjoy your families. Be good to each other. Be sure to subscribe to Hang Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes all season long. Make sure you leave a review. Shout out my man, Clipper Darrell Jr., John Schuhmann on Twitter all week with the Clippers at number 1 on his power ranks. When I saw it, again, I thought you were kidding, Shu. Now I know that, crazy things do happen. I don't ever remember the Clippers being number 1 in the power rankings in the time I've been paying attention. It probably has happened.
I think it's probably happened.
But this was a stunner.
I'll have to go back and look. But
yeah, to see them in there. For Shu, I'm Sekou Smith. Our producer, John Hartzell in Atlanta. We'll see you right here next time on the Hang Time Podcast.